Good evening. Would like to welcome you to our regular city council meeting, and must not be too exciting agenda since our attendance is a little less than some, but welcome to those in person and those that may be watching. Madam Clerk, could we have our roll call, please?
Councilman Ziprick.
Present.
Councilman Peterson.
Present.
Councilman Popescu.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Rigsby.
Here.
And Mayor Brower.
Here.
All present.
We were meeting in closed session with item listed on the agenda for the City Council as well as an item from the Redevelopment Agency, and that meeting began around 6 p.m. and I would like to ask our City Attorney to provide a report on that closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 1 on the City Council agenda was a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation as identified in the agenda. In that matter, the council conferred, and there was some direction given, but no action to report at this time. On the Redevelopment Agency agenda, item number 1 there was a conference with real property negotiator regarding the property listed. There was direction given again and no final action to report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would stand with me, I would like to lead you with the invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you for the many blessings you give us, including the opportunity to meet as a city council and make the best decisions that we can for our city and community. We ask for your wisdom and patience with us during this evening's session. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
This brings us to the oral reports from the public. Any items not on the agenda, now is the opportunity to address those. Seeing no one coming forward on that, we will move on to our scheduled items. The first item is a joint public hearing with the City Council, and I will also ask the Redevelopment Agency Chairman to open his portion.
The RDA is called to order.
And with RDA's Chairman's permission, is it possible we could have these jointly? Okay, thank you. This involves a housing disposition agreement. Won't read all the details as listed in the agenda, and ask our city clerk / agency secretary to give us a update and report on this item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chairman, both of these homes, the one on Sonora Loop 25454 and 10942 Cabrillo Loop, are situated in the Parkside Homes tract. 35 of the 58 homes in that tract are or carry with it an affordability covenant for long-term affordability purposes. These two homes the agency did purchase from the original owners at an affordable price, and we now have 2 new owners that are income qualified to purchase. They have signed the initial agreement to purchase, approving the price. The sales contract is per your former direction, and so if these resolutions are adopted this evening, we can move forward and open escrow. We expect to be able to close October 1. So all the terms have been agreed to with the new owners.
Questions for the city clerk / agency secretary? If none, this is a public hearing. I would like to open the public hearing jointly with the RDA And anyone wishing to address either body, now is the opportunity. Don't have any slips. Seeing none come forward, I will close the public hearing. And our city attorney has signaled that he will be willing to flex his usual rule and accept potentially an action on all these items in one action. Looking for discussion or action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move Council Bill R 2009-48, CRA Bill 2009-16, Council Bill 2009-49, CRA Bill 2009-117.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. So this is, I understand it will include everything under item 2, if that is acceptable. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no opposition. All right, item number 3. This is an extension of moratorium on the medical marijuana dispensaries. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you indicated, this is an extension of the previous moratorium adopted by the City Council. Tonight's action, if approved, would extend for an additional 10 months and 15 days for a total of 1 year, the moratorium that was imposed by the previous ordinance. The reason for the extension is that we are still awaiting the court case in the Anaheim matter that will clarify some of these rules and regulations. The hearing on that was postponed by the court to September 23rd, and the decision is anticipated sometime after that, hopefully before the end of the year. And so it appears that we need that additional guidance before we can finalize regulations here in this city, and therefore we recommend adopting the ordinance by a roll call vote.
This is a public hearing. I will open this item for any input from the public. Seeing no one coming forward and not having a slip, I will close the public hearing and ask for direction from council.
Second.
And
Do we have to read the
this is
for
a
the
roll
waiving.
call.
We have to,
So this is
You were moving the waiving.
action to
right. That's what I was seconding.
has been moved and seconded to do the waiving and the reading. So we're moving on or voting on just that specific action unless there's no other comments. Seeing none, again moving to go by roll call only. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Madam Clerk.
It is entitled An Interim Ordinance of the City Council of the City of Loma Linda imposing as an urgency measure an extended moratorium on the approval, commencement, establishment, or operation of medical marijuana dispensaries. You may vote. And it passes unanimously.
That brings us to the consent calendar. Been moved
Second.
and seconded. The only comment I have, just excited to see some more potential addition to our solar electric, and we've been a pioneer in that area, and it's exciting to see a little more activity in that direction. Anyway, consent calendar's been moved and seconded. Any other comments? If not, all in favor say aye. Hearing unanimous, no opposed on that. Remarkably, this brings us through old and new business with none listed, and so that brings us to reports of councilmen.
Yeah, I'd like to just make a quick comment. I'd like to give plugs for good business in the city, and my daughter owns a Honda that she bought up in the desert new. It's had some serious problems with it, and actually the warranty had run out because of the 50,000 mile, but it was something that's happened already 3 times on it, so we went down to Spring down here, and even though the warranty was out, they took her right in and fixed it, and really treated her very well. I just got to put it, plug it. It was very good service, excellent service.
Good. Other reports?
Yeah.
Councilman Zip?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There had been some discussion about having a chance for the public to hear a discussion about the settlement that was entered into last council meeting on the Save Loma Linda versus City of Loma Linda lawsuit. And I was going to suggest that that be agendized for the next meeting to allow people who are interested to come and ask questions, and have staff provide what report is permissible. I think one of the issues that, because it was a closed session item, one of the issues that has been raised is what can the public know, and we'll have to leave it a little bit to the discretion of the city attorney and staff to know how far it is possible to go. But I think one of the arguments in favor of having somewhat of a discussion on this is because you obviously do have a member of Save Loma Linda on the council. Part of the reason for the confidentiality is in my view lost, and so some people in the public have said, well, what went on? And so we have to have a little bit of an explanation of why you go into a settlement, perhaps what some of the pros and cons were, that sort of thing, because otherwise people are saying it's hard to understand why a settlement was entered into and what the result was and that sort of thing. Thank you.
Other reports of councilmen? Only item I was going to comment on, and seeing Mr. Carlisle from the chamber, I was unfortunately working last Wednesday night, but my daughter and others I talked to that attended the first evening session of the new farmers market reported very brisk business and seemed to be a real hit. So I was amazed the reports I heard for how successful the very first one was. So again, give credit to all the individuals, and especially Mr. Carlisle and others involved, and trust we may be on to something good here. So thanks.
Mr. Mayor, I did have a citizen ask me this week where the market had gone from Sunday morning. So I did a quick plug. This is from my front yard, but I think we're going to have to continue. I don't know if we have a way of putting something on our community access channel, like a little announcement that it moved. We may already be doing that, but as much as we can, give some PR to it, because apparently not everybody knows. We'll have to keep working on that. But it was a good turnout. I enjoyed going too, and I know, Mr. Mayor, I think you were the only one that wasn't able to be there. I think the rest of us were able to make it, and I think we all had a good time and thought it was pretty impressive. And we understand you can't get to everything, but it was a good time, a good turnout. Dusty already talked about some of the recipes he made with some of the vegetables. He was telling me.
Yeah, I had a splendid table from the Splendid Table Cookbook using some of the ingredients. It was wonderful.
Great. All right. Well, if there's no other reports of councilmen, we'll move on to reports of officers. We have a couple of items listed. The first one is the so-called ICSC, and comments and any reports related to that from Economic Director.
Yeah, actually, I had the privilege to go to the International Council of Shopping Centers convention in San Diego. Met with several national retailers and developers. Was pleasantly surprised that a lot of these guys know where Loma Linda is. Some of them are even very cognizant of what intersection is available, and one of them was even telling us about the curb and the fire hydrant being in the way, that they'd actually like to have something. So very, very surprising in that respect. A little disappointing, and throughout the entire conference, that the consensus is until the capital markets loosen up a little bit, nobody has the ability to purchase real estate, finance construction, or even get bridge loans to buy inventory to get a store open. And many large centers throughout the country are not even charging rent to some of their smaller customers just to keep the foot traffic going until those markets loosen up. So on one side, it's a positive thing. On the other side, We still have a ways to go, but I think we're laying some good groundwork early on and when we need to. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'd like to ask for a follow-up question. One of the things that you just alluded to was there is a fair amount of empty retail space. Did you get any impression as to the types of business that might be interested in our community looking to the future? Is it restaurants? Is it uniform shops supplying the institutional traffic? What type of things might be of interest?
The entire spectrum, everybody from Golden Corral, that's kind of a buffet type restaurant, to AutoZone, to Walgreens, to I think throughout the retail industry, Loma is on the map, and not necessarily because of the institutions, because of the healthcare background, but just because it's a relatively affluent community and in a good location as far as access and transport.
Very good, thanks.
I attended the conference with Conrad and pretty much agree with everything he has summarized. One of the things that transpired as a result of this conference was we actually spent a lot of time talking to quite a few cities, and a lot of the cities who have actually had booths there. And without going into details about specific cities, but two particular cities reminded me that one of the things that they had to do in order to entice some retailers is show that they need to have the right type of housing in order to bring these retailers in, and especially more on the high end, which leads me into another section, which is prior to this conference, I met with some officials from the university, and they were kind enough, in spite of some of their troubles with our city, to continue to cooperate with us. And they provided me with some valuable information about their employees and their incomes and how many of them live in Loma Linda and out. And I was shocked but not surprised to see that a lot of people who do work at the medical center university are actually professionals, and they actually make very good money. And a lot of those folks, unfortunately, cannot live in Loma Linda because as of right now, we still have too many apartments, not enough single-family homes. And in the last few years, the few homes that we have built have been too closely packed for most people to really want to live in them. So as a result, one of the lessons learned is that if we want people living closer to work, and I think there's lots of employees, for example, the medical center has about 7,500 employees and 6,000 of them do not live in Loma Linda, but yet their average income is in the $85,000 range. They could afford a house if they could find one in Loma Linda. So we just approved a general plan that included a lot of single-family houses, and thanks to Measure V, now the houses are going to actually be a little bit further apart, so people have a little breathing room and a little bit of yard for their kids and family. So now we just need to get beyond the economy and hopefully get some development going and get some single-family housing moved in here, so then we can have people living closer to work, but at the same time try to attract some retailers who like that type of clientele.
Comment?
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, Ovi. One of the things that, before you were on the council, I was in a number of meetings involving the city and the university in which, to be honest, University Village was discussed. And this may be a surprise, but there was a general cooperative attitude between the institutions and those developers at that time that was being designed with the university in mind. So part of the reason that the housing started to develop the way it did along Mission Road was after consultation. I think that something that maybe you've misunderstood and others have misunderstood was the council is not a developer, and the council has more or less responded to requests from different developers, the institution. I know one time Floyd Peterson here took me around for an entire Friday afternoon hunting for one housing unit. I'll never forget that, for one family, and he told me that it was not uncommon for him to spend hours looking for a unit for someone to live in. And so I think that there's a little bit of a misunderstanding, even on your part, that some of the things that people complained about on Mission Road were not just something the council here dreamed up because it wanted to do it, but it was really being done in response to requests that had come in even from, frankly, the institutional community as they and Lewis companies talked. And that's where we got where we are, and I think that has to be said. I'm delighted with having some very fine, high-quality homes come into the city. I think it's great. But there also are going to be some people who work for the institutions and other businesses in town who may not be able to afford the most highest upscale home. And I think that the council here, and I'm just speaking for myself, I'm trying to be responsive to what the community has indicated in the past it wanted. And if our design wasn't the greatest or something, certainly one's not trying to push something here from the council, but I just think you have this feeling that somehow this is a council-driven goal to have lots of small houses, and it really wasn't so much out of the council as a response to other things in the community. So I have to respond. I appreciate where you're coming from. Delighted to have large upscale homes come in. That's great. But it's a different perspective than it was back then.
You will notice that you first mentioned, Mr. Popescu, about the nice salaries that some of these people are making from the medical center. And you will also notice that if you drive to the city just exactly to the east of us, where those people are living is not down on the flatland. They're living on top of the hills. That's where all the big homes are, on top of the hills. You're not going to get those kind of homes down at Redlands Boulevard.
Well, not to start a debate, but I don't recall anybody actually stating that we weren't the ones that approved the houses, and the houses were built because the university wanted us to, and the developers talked to the university. I think ultimately the buck stops with the council. They approved those homes. In light of the fact a lot of people said that's not the type of housing we want in Loma Linda, they proceeded to approve the general plan that provided us with more of the same type of housing. Even to this day, Mr. Peterson laments over the fact that University Village and Orchard Park would have been great projects, but he has a right to say that, and he believes that those are good projects for the community. The community didn't feel that 2,000 apartments and condos was what their community wanted, and I think that the community has clearly spoken, and they said, look, we would like housing, but we want housing that's a bit further apart. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous to just pass the buck and say, well, we really didn't want that, and we were listening to the developers and the university. And last I checked, the university doesn't really tell the city what to do. We're in charge of our own destiny, and the residents said this is the type of housing we want. And subsequently, they passed Measure V, which passed overwhelmingly despite incredible odds. And the people clearly spoke, and they said, look, we want housing, but we want houses further apart, and we want some yards, and I think we're going to move forward, and we're going to pursue that. To me, I think it was a little bit of vindication of the intelligence of the community, because they realized that if you have adequate housing where you have increased home ownership, with it comes nice communities with nice businesses. And we've got multiple cities that pretty much explained to us that, look, if you want certain businesses, you're going to have more single-family housing. And Loma Linda right now, 56% of all of our residents live in rental housing, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that that's how the city's been developed for the last 40 years. And I think that we have adequate housing for all of those who perhaps may not want to live in single-family homes. And as we move forward, we will continue to meet our state requirements of building affordable housing, but we have also an opportunity to build nice homes. Mr. Peterson said that most people may not necessarily live along Redlands Boulevard, but I beg to differ. He and I both live on State Street, which is a very nice street. It's 7,200 square foot lot size, and I think there's plenty of nurses and therapists who would love to live in Loma Linda if there were houses that are a bit further apart, and I'm hoping that we'll move in a direction in which we can provide more of that type of housing.
I think, Ovi, the point I wanted to make was that I would say the statement you were making earlier needed some clarification from the fact that historically you were not involved, you weren't in those meetings. I was, and I felt it was important to correct for the record how some of this came about. And what you're saying is not exactly historically accurate, and I feel that it's important to correct the record. That doesn't mean we can't go for nice size homes. I think it's fine. But there was also a request for a variety of housing, for a variety of income levels in the community, and there's always things one can learn and do a better job in designing. That always goes without saying. But if you're going back on what actually happened, I think it's important to state for the record what happened. That's all I'm doing. I was there. I heard the discussions.
Just wanted to point out that regardless of those discussions, the buck stops with you. You decide what housing goes in, and you have to listen to the residents. And I don't recall I've talked to a lot of university officials, and I don't hear any of them crying, saying, oh, I just wish you guys move forward with those projects because now we're just, we're in dire need of housing. None of that happened. So I'm not sure what meetings you're referring to, but nobody came up to me and said, we wanted a bunch of apartments and condos in Loma Linda. And I never heard that.
Even under Measure V, you have an exemption for the university to build higher density housing. And one of the points that was made back then, there was a discussion with the university and Lewis in the same room, here right in the community room, and went for several hours. So this is historic fact, and I think it's good for the public to know there is another side to the story of how some of these projects got developed. Whether you were there or not, you weren't, but I think it's good to put on the record what happened historically. The council isn't driving every project. The council is receiving projects after other groups get together and discuss them. The council is a recipient and has to vote on things. And just like right now, we approved something low mod income, okay? Somebody could come along and criticize you for doing that, saying, how dare you do that? Well, you say, but that was something that seemed right and advisable at the time. I'm just trying to make a historic point that at the time that some of these things came up, there was a reason why they moved forward. And it wasn't just the city council, there were other forces in town that asked for it.
But what of the tenacious clinging to the concept in the light of the approval of Measure V? There's this tenacious clinging to the concept that we have to have this high-density development going on.
No.
And woe betide the town that turns away $75 million for having done so.
Actually, Dusty, the only point I was making, I was responding to our colleague in laying out some historic fact, because if he repeats it often enough, people might think that that's historically what happened. I think there's another side to the story of how it developed. I was there and I heard the discussions, and I think it just needs to be laid out.
And I'm not disputing any of that. I'm just saying, what about this tenacious clinging to the concept when the community has come out against it? And there are, colleagues who would lecture the community on the stupidity of the action they've taken. And there are people in the community, including my relatives, that will lecture us on how stupid we were for turning aside these projects. Well, the community doesn't seem to like them. And is it time for the council to move past this excuse that the university asked for it?
Well, actually, Dusty, here's my point, is the point was raised by OV, and I'm going to respond to it, and I'm limiting it to that. So I'm stopped. But I think it's appropriate to respond if something is said that's historically inaccurate. That's all.
Council Peters.
How much on Mission Road? I know those projects, you don't like them. How much time have you spent in those projects? I have two daughters who live in that project down there, two of them. I spend lots of time down there. I talk a lot. Every time I meet somebody on the sidewalk, I talk to them because I want to know about it. I said, how do you like? Number one, that place is full of professional people. Doctors, nurses, dentists, I don't care who. Most of the people living there are professionals. Number two, we have a huge transient community, probably more so than any city around us. People come in and move in and out. So they're not going to stay here the rest of their life. Most of these people come. Number three, you just walk around down there and ask those people if they like their community. They love it. They love it. They wouldn't change a thing, except the sidewalk that went around the park that they needed to change. They love it down there. The people who live there love it. In fact, I've talked to two different people down there who moved there from Redlands because they couldn't find that kind of development in Redlands. They moved to Loma Linda, sold their place in Redlands and moved to Loma Linda because they liked it better.
And that's fine. I'm not sure that I would disagree with there's people who like living there, and I don't want to necessarily say that those projects are ones in which some people may not want to live in. I think that the problem that those projects cause within the community wasn't the type of housing or the amount of housing, was just the fact that the houses were a little bit too close and the streets were too narrow. There's not enough parking, and just as many people who come up to you and say they're very happy there, I've had a few people who do live there and unhappy about the conditions. So I think there's going to be arguments on both sides. I think we just need to move forward and trying to improve and follow on what the citizens want. I know Mr. Ziprick would like to claim that somehow we did it all because of the university. It's a matter of opinion. I don't buy it. I sat in on some of the meetings. Some of the Save Loma people actively campaigned against those houses before they were being approved, and I don't recall any of them saying, you know, we kept talking to the council, and somehow or another we had all these university officials who kept popping up and saying, oh no, we've got to move forward, we've got to move forward. So Mr. Ziprick may claim that there were meetings in which university officials were the big advocates. I don't see any evidence of that. So,
Ovi, I was in the meetings. I don't remember seeing you there. It's been quite a few years ago.
I was not there, but there's people who protested. I was a member of Kathy and her mom were there, and
they were not in those meetings.
They raised. Well, they must have not been public. I'm not sure what those meetings were.
They were in the community room. But the point, all I'm doing, I'm simply responding. What happened is when you started taking some shots in your comment, maybe you didn't intend it to sound that way, but it sounded like almost campaigning again. And I thought, you know, it's least needs to be presented on the other side of how we got there. So I think it's appropriate to mention the counterpoint to that. The council doesn't envision all these things. They're envisioned by others. The council's not a developer. So I'm simply responding to your comment. I'm done, but if you keep campaigning on something, I'm going to at least respond. There's another side to it.
Just a couple of perspectives, since I haven't put my 2 cents worth in. We're getting a little far afield from what's listed, but I will respond since comments related to this item on the agenda. But I do think there are a couple of things that are worth keeping in mind. How any historical things developed. Talked to 10 people that were in the room at the same time. All 10 of them are going to have a different recollection of specific events, and so I think there's going to be some discrepancies on exactly how certain things developed, and that's just a matter of fact. But I do think a couple of things are important long-term to keep in mind. I think most of us would agree it is a real potential long-term impediment to this community. Not that there's necessarily, it's the only part of the market we're after, but the fact that we've lost most of the long-term residents that are in the professional category has been a real problem. And a lot of them, frankly, have moved to Redlands for being able to develop custom homes and so on and so forth. That is a real problem, and I think we need to keep that as a goal, as an important element of our community as we go forward. To be blunt, on the Mission Road, again, I think a lot of good folks live there, a lot of good design elements. I think the big problem was where it was located. I think that type of housing would have been very appropriate between Redlands Boulevard and Mission Road. I think, in my personal opinion, we should have kept larger single-family homes where that development was built. I think a lot of the problems and rancor have come because of just the location, not the specific development. And ultimately, we as council, those of us that were on council and so forth, do bear responsibility for what's approved, and you know exactly all the actions, meetings, and how things develop. We can again have different recollections, but ultimately the buck does stop with us as council. But anyway, that's my 2 cents worth, and if we're ready to move on, we will. Any 30-second follow-ups from anyone?
I just wanted to follow up on one of your statement. I just want to make sure that people understand the record's very clear, and I actually looked this up. But you, Mayor Brower, voted against those projects. I just want to make sure that people are aware of it, that you actually did raise some of those same concerns, and yet you were outvoted by your colleagues. But I just wanted to make sure the public understands that you, at the same time, didn't feel like those are the right projects at the right time.
Just to be fair, I did vote for some elements and some of those projects. I certainly tried to make some arguments for lower density, but I was potentially part of the process, and so I deserve potentially some credit or fault, depending on the issue. Last 30 seconds, sorry if
Ovi,
don't mind wrapping up.
Ovi, if you went back and looked, you'll notice on one of the projects, I made a motion to cut the density below the legal minimum. We reduced one project further and further down, and the developer protested that we'd actually taken it down below his minimum. And one of the points is we were stuck somewhat with a general plan that was quite old and has only now been revised. But when you're actually having to vote on something and the law exists, you can't just do anything you want. You actually have to follow the rules. And that's one of the problems you know we all face in government, is we have to play by the rules too. And we came up with a rationale for doing it, but he protested very strongly. And if you looked at the record, you're aware of that. Okay, I'll stop it there.
Lloyd?
Just 15 seconds. However, if you go back and look at the votes on both University Village and Orchard Park, it was unanimous in all cases.
That is true, and I think Mayor Brower did say that perhaps that was a mistake.
Well, he can comment on that, I presume, if it's...
I think we've all made enough comments for now, and unless there's any other additional comments, I would like to move on to item 11.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just would like to announce that we plan to have a ribbon cutting for Mountain View Avenue widening project on September 22nd at 5:30. It will be at the parking lot of Mountain View Plaza, close by the Spanish Church. Again at 5:30, September 22nd. Thank you.
Be an exciting activity we've all been looking forward to. So we have assurances everything should be completed by then, I take it, huh?
Yes, sir. We'll be.
All right. Very good. I think that's the end of reports of officers. Unless there's any other items, we will adjourn City Council.
Okay, we're back to the redevelopment agency. We've already discussed the closed session item. Are there any items to be added or deleted?
No, sir.
Are there any oral reports or comments from the public on any non-agenda items? Seeing none, we've had our joint public hearing. The minutes of August 25 are available.
I'll move them.
Second.
Any discussion? Any opposition? Seeing none, it's approved. Item number 4, Council Bill R 2009-18.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, any opposition? There's none, so it's approved. We're adjourned. Thank you.